Hello everyone. We're going to continue today looking into Genesis. Last week for several weeks we've been talking about Abraham, and we're going to continue today and discuss his grandchildren. His son Isaac has married Rebekah, you might remember, and at first she just couldn't conceive, and Isaac goes to the Lord and says, please will you bless Rebekah with a child? And in fact he does. She won't know it at the time. They didn't have ultrasound back then, but in Genesis chapter 25 and verse 22 it says this: the two children, she wouldn't have known it was two, they struggled with each other in her womb. So she was obviously having some real pains and something going on there. And she went to ask the Lord about it. And she says, why is this happening? What's going on? Maybe she was nervous. Is everything okay with this pregnancy? And the Lord tells her in verse 23, he says, the sons in your womb will become two nations. And so now she knows she's going to have twins. He says, from the very beginning, now this is very important, listen to this. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and this is very important throughout what we're going to talk today. And your older son will serve your younger son. Keep that in mind. Your older son will serve your younger son. This is very important. This is a truth that the Lord has spoken. It was not culturally right. Of course, God is always right, but it was not culturally right, because the older son would always be the one who would inherit, and the older son would always be the one that might tell the rest of the family the directions they're going, what they're going to do. And yet God says here, your older son will serve your younger son. This is what the Lord has spoken. Okay, so now let's move on to something else. We're going to fast forward here. They're born here, and now they're already 40 years old. The two sons, Jacob, the younger, and Esau, the older. Jacob and Esau. So we go into chapter 26, and we see at the end of the chapter, it says at verse 34, at the age of 40, Esau married two Hittite wives. It says, Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. He should not have married them. He should have gone back to his relatives, to the land of his own people, as we know that Jacob does later. We'll get to that in a moment, but he doesn't. In the New Testament, it tells us in Corinthians that it's very important not to be unequally yoked, meaning if you're a Christian, you're not yet married, be careful that you don't marry a non-Christian. It brings a lot of heartache. Because you want your heart to be at one with your mate. I can remember when I was in high school, our youth leader used to say, every date is a potential mate. That kind of stuck with me. But there's real truth there. It can be very heartbreaking. I've known many, many, many people over the years, men who've married unsaved wives, wives married unsaved husbands, and they're burdened for them. They want their spouses, of course, to come to the Lord, and maybe they're against it, and it's a heartbreaking thing. Best not even get into that situation to begin with. So we see that Esau has married wives that were not following the same God, the one and only true God, and it just was miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. Now the next chapter, 27. We're going to spend a lot of time in this chapter. This is very important. It says in verse 1, one day when Isaac, he's now getting old, he's already gone pretty much totally blind, and he calls for Esau, the older son. Now remember what the Lord had said earlier about the blessing. The younger is going to be over the older. The older will serve the younger. So he calls Esau, he calls the older son, and he says to him, he says, Esau, I'm an old man now, and I don't know when I'm going to die, anytime. He says, take your bow and your arrows and go out and shoot some wild game for me and prepare my favorite dish, and you bring it for me to eat. And then he says this is verse 2. He says in verse 4, then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn, before I die. Oh, now this is very interesting. God had already said at their birth that the older will serve the younger. Most unusual, not culturally done at that time. And Isaac evidently has had trouble with this the entire time. And because he says, I'm going to pronounce the blessing that belongs to you. In other words, you're my firstborn, and well, God he'll probably accept that. He'll see it's going to be all right. You ever done that? You ever known in your heart that God has said do something, or even just read it in black and white, a command of God in his word, and yet you're thinking, well, I don't really want to do that, or maybe this will be okay. I'll go this way. I'm sure it'll turn out all right. And he'll go ahead and bless me because he'll see that my plan worked out good anyway. You ever done that? I think we've all been on that pathway, haven't we? And here, though, Isaac, he's doing something very deliberate. God categorically said upon their birth that Esau would serve Jacob, but it's not culturally done. Well, we read on down in verse 5, Rebekah, she overhears what Isaac had told Esau, and she's thinking, no, that can't be. Now, she's already partial to Jacob anyway. And so look what she says. She says, Jacob, come here, do exactly as I tell you. This is verse 8. She says, go out to the flocks, bring me 2 fine young goats. I'm going to prepare your father's dish for you to give him. And then I want you to take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies. Now, on the one hand, Rebekah knows what God said, that it's going to be Jacob to receive the blessing of the firstborn and not the actual firstborn Esau. And yet the way she is going about bringing God's purposes through lies and deception, that showed a great distrust in God. Why God couldn't bring that about himself? Can God not bring about his own word himself? Do we have to resort to lies and deception to help him out? We know the answer to that. Jacob kind of protests in verse 11. He says, look, my brother Esau, he's a hairy man, and my skin is smooth, and what if my father touches me and he'll see I'm trying to trick him? That's not going to work. But the mother, she says, I'm going to take the skins of the goat, and the verses following, she says, I'm going to cover your arms, and I'm going to cover your neck, and he won't know it. I'm going to put some of Esau's clothes on you, so you'll even smell like him. So verse 18, listen to this. Jacob takes the dish that his mother prepared. He takes the food to his father, and he says, my father? And Isaac says, yes, my son. Who are you, Esau or Jacob? Remember, he's practically blind. Who are you, Esau or Jacob? And Jacob replied, it's Esau, your firstborn, and I've done as you told me, and here's the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me the blessing. And Isaac says, well, how did you find this so quickly? How did you shoot the game so quickly, my son? And Jacob answers, the Lord put it in my path. Yes, it was the Lord who did it. Oh my goodness, it's getting worse and worse and worse. Now he's bringing God into his life. He's saying, how did I find this deer or whatever it was he might have found? God blessed me and put it in my path. Oh my goodness. Once you start a lie, you have to dig a hole to cover more lies and more lies. It's a terrible thing. So in verse 21, Isaac says to Jacob, come closer so I can touch you. I need to make sure. He heard the voice, you see. So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him, and Isaac says, well, the voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's. I didn't recognize you, but okay. And so he takes the dish, he eats it, and then he blesses Jacob. Now, once the blessing has been officially given, this is like a ceremony, really. Once it has been officially given, it cannot be revoked. Verse 30, the plot thickens. Verse 30, it says, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and almost before Jacob had even left his father, he leaves, Esau returns. And Esau prepared a delicious meal just as his father liked and had required. And he comes in and he says, sit up, father, eat my wild game, and then you can give me your blessing. And Isaac asked him, who are you? And Esau replies, it's me, your son, your firstborn son, Esau. Verse 33, listen to this. Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably. And he said, who have I just blessed? He realizes, he knows. He begins to tremble uncontrollably. I found that verse interesting. Uncontrollably. Could be 2 reasons there. One is the obvious. His desire did not get met. He wanted that first son blessing to go to his first son, the first Esau. That's one reason he might be trembling, but I think there's a greater reason. He had to have remembered what God had said all along. God said, Esau is going to serve Jacob. Jacob is going to be the one to receive the blessing. And Isaac had tried to outwit God to bring his purposes about and not God's purposes. God's purposes will always be brought to light. It will always be brought along the path. God's purposes stand. It doesn't matter how clever we think we are. It doesn't matter how we beg and plead and connive and lie and deceive. God's purposes stand. It's best just to go along with them, you know. It's best just to go along with them. And he begins to tremble. He had to realize what had happened. We move along now to chapter 28. And it says, Isaac called Jacob. He blessed him, and he says, Jacob, you must not marry any wives here. He's 40 years old. Unlike his brother, he had not yet married. He says, you must not do this. You must go back to our land. You must go back and marry from among your relatives there. You must do that. And so Jacob obeyed his father, and he did what he said, and he packs up everything, and off he goes. Now I call this, and this is very true, this is Jacob getting onto the right track at last. Oh, I mean, he was following his mother's advice, yes, but he was a grown man. He didn't have to do that. And he deceived his father. You know, he put on the goat skin. He put on the clothes of his brother. He made the dish, or his mother did. He served it to his father. And when his father said, where did you get the deer so quickly, or the wild game so quickly? Oh, the Lord put it in my path. What deception. Oh, what an awful lie, right to his father's face. Oh, and we think to ourselves, how could he do that? And why on earth would God want to bless Jacob after that? You ever read these stories and think of that? I do sometimes, and I've read stories of Jacob, this same story, many times in my life, and many times as I've read it, I thought, boy, good thing I wasn't God. I would have chucked him right out. As soon as my attitude comes to light and I realize what I've just said, what I've just thought, I have one of my personal, what I call looking in the mirror moments. It's at moments like that I have to say, wait a minute. Why am I questioning why did God bless Jacob after all that? Because when I look in the mirror and I'm honest before God and I think of things in my life, I think the question has to come, why did God bless me? Why has he ever blessed me? Oh, the grace of God, the graciousness and the grace and the mercy of God. Whew, never ending. Jacob's on the right path here. Now, something very interesting is going to happen as we go on down in the chapter. Verse 20 is chapter 28, and it says he's on the road. And then 28 and verse 12, it says it's the end of the day of he's on his journey. He's tired. He goes to sleep. He says, as he slept, he had a dream. The dream was from God. It says there was a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven, and he saw angels of God just going up and down, up and down, up and down. And at the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he says to Jacob in the dream, he says, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of your father Isaac, and the ground on which you are lying belongs to you. And God is going to now reiterate the promise that he originally gave to Abraham, that all his descendants were going to inherit everything. Remember, they'd be more than the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore. He says in verse 14 of chapter 28, God says, your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions to the west and east, the north and south, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. So there is God just reiterating the promise that he gave to Abraham, which was going to come to his descendants. So it had to come through his grandchildren. We don't know why God chose Jacob and not Esau. We don't know. But he chose Jacob. He chose Jacob. He must have known maybe something of the heart. We don't know. It doesn't categorically say. Although we do know that Esau, he starts off, he did not even go back to the land of his fathers to marry his wives. And that, of course, put some troubles there. But anyway, Jacob was a great liar and deceiver, so he had his own troubles also, as we have already said. It says the next morning, verse 18, it says Jacob got up very early, and he took the stone that he had rested his head against. He was going to make a memorial pillar. Why? Let's back up to the verse preceding. It said when he first woke up from that sleep, he remembered that dream, and it was so real, and he knew it was God. And Jacob says this, verse 16, he says, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't even know it. The fact is, the Lord was in that place all through his 40 years thus far. but he just didn't know it. He wasn't recognizing him. He wasn't looking to him. He wasn't paying attention to the God of his father Isaac and the God of his grandfather Abraham. Wasn't paying any attention at all. But the truth is, the Lord's omnipresent. Of course he was there. He was watching over. He had his purposes in mind. He knew what was going to happen. He knew what he wanted to happen. And he was in this place. But finally, Jacob recognizes the Lord is in this place. So he takes the stone that he slept on that night. He sets it up as a memorial to God. And then in verse 21, he says, the Lord will certainly be my God. He says, and this memorial pillar that I have set up will become a place of worshiping God. And I will present from this time to God 1/10 of everything he gives to me. Wow. What a change of heart in Jacob from just previously, a short time previously, when he was downright bald-faced lying to his father saying, oh, where did I get this deer so quickly? Oh, the Lord put it in my path. Yes, Father, it's me. I'm not Esau. I'm not Jacob. I'm Esau. Yes, it's me. Oh, what lies, what deception, all of them. Isaac was ignoring God's promise. He did not like the idea that his firstborn Esau would not inherit, so he devises his own plan. That didn't work. Rebekah got in on it, leading her son to go ahead and follow her plan to lie and cheat his father. Jacob agreed. Grown man could have said no. He agreed. He deceives and lies to his father. Esau wasn't following things of the Lord anyway, doing his own thing. And finally, Jacob gets on the right path, and he's going to start with who he marries, and he's going to go back to his relatives. And on the way, God appears to him in a dream. Why didn't God appear to him in a dream in the middle of his deception? Well, his heart was probably not ready to receive that, don't you think? But when he's on the right way, when he turns back to do those things that are the right thing to do, his heart then becomes ready to hear God. And God chose that moment to give him that dream and to speak to him. And Jacob receives it and he understands, and he says, surely, now I understand, surely the Lord is in this place and I didn't even know it. You've been there before. When you look over your own past, do you see some things that are not very pretty? I do. I think, oh, why did I do that? Why was I like that? Oh. But you know, the God, we see something in his character here, the God of Jacob is our God today. There's only one. He's the same one. And the God who forgave Jacob, forgave all that ugliness in his past, looked at the intent of his heart today and promised him blessings for all his tomorrows. He does the same with us. He can look at our past, and when we finally realize surely the Lord is in this place, and we come to him and ask for forgiveness, he casts our sins as far as the east is from the west and remembers them no more. Oh, how I love that. Remembers them no more. So past is past. The heart is now right. He blesses today and prepares your blessings for all of your tomorrows. Isn't that something? There's a verse I love. I've mentioned this many times, and if you keep listening to my videos, I'll no doubt be mentioning it again. It's Proverbs 4:23. It says, guard your heart. Guard it. Why? It tells us, because it affects everything you do. Guard your heart. Keep your heart soft toward the things of God. Keep your heart reminded that surely the Lord is in this place. He's watching. Oh, keep your heart ready to hear those things of God. Keep your heart ready with a desire to obey the words of God. His purposes will come about with or without you. Oh, but it's so much nicer, so much full of joy and peace when we keep our heart soft and bent towards him, because then we get to become a part of that glorious purpose that he has planned for your path, for my path, and all for the glory of the kingdom of God, all to the glory of Jesus who took our place on that cross. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Why wouldn't we want to come to that place that Jacob had come to and said, Lord, surely now I know, and despite everything that has happened, now I know you are in this place, and my heart is bent towards you. And as he said here, he set up that stone as a memorial to worship. We can set up our hearts ready to worship all the time. Lord, I recognize you are in this place. You have blessed me. You have forgiven me. My heart, my mind is set on you. You are in this place. I choose to worship you. And when we choose to worship him, wow, what joy, what peace. Oh, what direction he gives us and guides us along. Can be scary sometimes, but he said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I'm going to be with you in the hard times. As we continue to read the story, Jacob had continued hard times, but surely the Lord was with him, as he always had been. Surely the Lord is always in our place, not some of the time, all of the time. May you be blessed on whatever path you are on today. Until next time.